In this movie, I'll show you how to brighten up this foreground region, these little paths toward the bottom of this layer, in order to create this effect right here, which I think is still more dramatic, and it also helps to set off our mysterious figure and her shadow. So I'll go ahead and switch over to my image at hand. If I scroll up the list here, you can see that this darker adjustment layer is responsible for all that darkness. So what I need to do is mask that layer. To start with, I'm going to turn it off just so I can better see what I'm doing. And if you zoom on in here, you can tell that we do have edges, areas of rapid luminance transition. So in other words, we've got these dark pixels right next to these bright pixels, which means that the tool of choice in this case is going to be the quick selection tool. So go ahead and select that quick selection tool if necessary from the magic wand tool flyout menu. Make sure auto enhance is turned on. That's very important. And the reason mine went off is because I right clicked on that icon on the far left side of the options bar and I reset that tool. And anytime you reset this tool, you turn auto enhance off. That's a bad thing, so turn it back on. And then I'll go ahead and zoom out a little bit so I can take in more of the image at a time. And I'll start dragging over here, let's say. And the great thing about this example is it will give you a sense for the real behavior of the quick selection tool. The first time we saw it, it worked pretty darn well and pretty darn easily. That is not typical of this tool. The one thing the quick selection tool is not is quick. All right, I failed to select this area right here, so I'll go ahead and shift drag inside of it, but notice the second I do, I end up deselecting this darker peninsula. So I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and Paint in order to deselect this region, and then I'll just Alt or Option click out here in order to do some more deselecting. So recall, if you just drag or you just click, by default, the behavior is that you're going to add to the selection, which is just fine. Based on my experience, that's a good behavior. And now I'm going to paint this little region over there to add it to the selection. All right, now here's the trickiest part. See this sort of dry stuff over here that's a little darker? I want to deselect all of it. So what I'm going to have to do is Alt drag right over here a little bit, and then Alt drag around like so. And notice that does a pretty good job in some regions. I do have some marching ants that I need to get rid of up here, so I'm Alt dragging. That's an Option drag on a Mac. Now I'm going to reduce the size of my cursor, which gives me finer control, and I'll Alt drag or Option drag in order to deselect that region. Now, the thing that exasperates me about this tool is that you have so little control. You have this one checkbox that you can select. You have this other one that's of some use when you're looking at a bunch of layers at the same time. But you don't have any other controls that might make this tool work a little more like you want it to. But the one thing you can do is increase the size of your cursor to make big adjustments and to select lots of pixels at a time, and to reduce the size of your cursor by pressing the left bracket key in this case, in order to reduce the size of your cursor, in which case you're going to make more fine-tuned adjustments. Now I want to select this area right here, so I'm just going to kind of drag inside of it. Sometimes clicking is better than dragging with this tool, by the way. And then I'm going to increase the size of my cursor, and I'm going to paint down like so. I'm actually Alt dragging or Option dragging to deselect that area, which reselected this area that I had formerly successfully deselected, but I'll come back to it. As soon as I Alt drag or Option drag over these little bits and pieces of marching ants over in this area, and then I'll reduce the size of my cursor and I'll paint into this area. And that did a good job. Did you see how things changed right there? I'm going to do that again so you can see what I mean. I'll go ahead and drag into that area right there. And notice that little detail above and to the right of my cursor. As soon as I release, the selection outline changes in order to wrap around it. So sometimes Photoshop will make changes on you. All right, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And then I'm just going to drag into this region, maybe click out here a couple of times as well in order to add that to the selection. And that looks good. So now I'll just go ahead and zoom out so that we can take in the entire image. It looks like there's a little bit of marching ant right there that should be painted over so that I'm adding that region to the selection. And I'll Alt drag or Option drag these details right there to deselect them. So in other words, even though this tool is easy to use, it can require a lot of back and forthing in order to get the desired results. All right, I'll just go ahead and Alt click at this location. And now let's turn this guy into a layer mask by turning the darker layer back on, clicking on that layer to make it active. We actually want to make this portion of the adjustment layer go away. So I'll go up to the select menu and choose the inverse command, or I can press Control-Shift-I or Command-Shift-I on a Mac, and then I'll drop down to the Add Layer Mask icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and I'll click, and that brightens up those details. But it does leave us with some pretty bad transitions, as you can see. At the very least, they're too abrupt. And notice that I selected a little bit too much there. So what I'm going to do is click on that detail. And because my layer mask thumbnail is selected, as you can see here inside the layers panel, I'm going to fill that detail with white. And I can do that because the foreground color is white, as you can see here at the bottom of the toolbox, by pressing Alt Backspace here on the PC or Option Delete on the Mac, and that'll bring back that dark adjustment. And now I'll press Control D or Command D on the Mac to deselect the image. All right, now what we need is some softer transitions, and to get those on the fly, non-destructively, so we're making a temporary modification, just go ahead and double-click on the layer mask thumbnail to bring up the properties panel and crank up that feather value, and I'm going to take it all the way up to 100 to create some very soft transitions, as we're seeing right here. And then I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to accept that change, and I'll hide the properties panel. And now I'll just go ahead and zoom out. And that is what I consider to be a real-world demonstration of how to get the Quick Selection tool to do exactly what you want, which in our case allowed us to mask this dark adjustment layer here inside Photoshop.